The Quinnipiac women's soccer team wrapped up conference play, and the men's ice hockey team traveled up to Boston to take on the Northeastern Huskies.
And we have the best time of the night, our top 5 plays of the week, all that and more coming up on Sports Paws. Hello everyone and welcome back to Studio 125. This is Sports Paws. I'm Shane Dennehy.
And I'm Emma Carmen. Quinnipiac athletics are in full swing as fall teams begin to wrap up their regular seasons and winter sports continue their out-of-conference play.
The Quinnipiac women's rugby team took on the Central Washington Huskies in a rematch of last year's NIRA national title game. Kyle Vassar has more.
We now welcome in Q30 Sports Rugby beat reporter Kyle Vassar. Kyle, thanks for joining us tonight.
Hey, thanks for having me, Emma.
Central Washington versus Quinnipiac was a matchup of the two NIRA powers. Kyle, did the better team win on Sunday?
Yeah, you know, Shane, I think that's been the real question ever since last year's national championship game. Quinnipiac picked up their first regular season win in program history against Central Washington, and they split this past regular season, losing at Central Washington and winning here at home. And the point differential was only 4 points after 2 games in favor of the Wildcats. So obviously they're two very even teams. But when I look at the difference, I think it has to do with their strength and conditioning and also with Central Washington tiring out at the end of the game. If you look at this past Sunday, Central Washington scored all their tries in the beginning of each half. They scored both of their first 2 tries in the first 20 minutes of the first half. Then they scored their next 2 tries in the first 10 minutes of the second half. So they didn't score anything at the end of each half. But you also have to factor in that they traveled to Army only 2 days prior. Quinnipiac had a whole 8 days of rest going into this match, so that might have played a bit of a difference. I also think Central Washington was a little more physical, and they have a bit of a better, they dominated scrums. They had harder hits with tackles. Quinnipiac had a few players down throughout the match that needed assistance. I really think the big difference, though, that had Quinnipiac with the win was their back line. They have Emily Roscoff, Alona Marr, Flora Poole, Rebecca Haight. Their back line was just that much better and made the difference.
Kyle, you're there all the time. Who has been Quinnipiac's MVP so far this season?
Yeah, Emma, I mean, they have a few players that could be the MVP on almost any team in the country, but I narrow it down to 2. And that's Alona Marr and Emily Roscoff. Emily Roscoff, I mean, both of them have been extremely clutch, but after each game, it seems like all of her teammates are saying, when is Emily Roscoff not a hero? She had the 2 tries to start off the game against Central Washington this past weekend. As for Alona Marr, she's just as good offensively and maybe even has a little bit of an edge defensively. She had a few really hard-hitting tackles against Central Washington. I think Alona Marr also gets a little more attention from the other team, which opens up the holes for other players like Roscoff and Rebecca Haight, allowing them to open up the offense. So I think Alona Marr has been the MVP so far, but it's really neck and neck.
All right, Kyle, Quinnipiac has one more game against AIC before they host the NIRA playoffs. What adjustments do they have to make before they do start the playoffs?
Well, adjustments was the whole thing going from the first time Quinnipiac played Central Washington to this past Sunday. And Becky Carlson said the big difference was they were playing their own game. They weren't playing what Central Washington wanted them to play. Quinnipiac was moving the ball to the outside and utilizing their great back line in which they almost always score their tries. If you look at the highlights from this past weekend, you'll notice a lot of these long runs are to the outside where they can spread the field. And now that they actually have a regulation-sized field, they have so much more space, and it's like wild animals getting let loose. They just have so much more room to the outside, and their back line is that much better than almost every team that they play, that they really have to get the ball to the outside. And then they also need some of their role players to step up. They need players like Mika Maples, who had the game-winning try to come up in big games. Players like Layla Scott, who had 3 tries earlier in the season. They needed players like that to step up.
So you've said all this, but do you think that Quinnipiac can win the national title for a 3rd straight season?
Yeah, I really think they can, Emma. I think they're the favorites going into it, especially because they are at home where they're undefeated so far. Alona Mar was talking to me after the game. She said that it really makes a big difference when they are playing at home compared to when they're out at, say, Central Washington, and they have almost no fans there. So I think it makes a big difference. And again, they have players like Alona Mar, the best player in the country, that should be the difference maker in the national championship.
All right, thank you, Kyle. Quinnipiac took on Central Washington this past weekend. Let's see how they did.
In a rematch of last year's NIRA National Championship game, it's only fitting Quinnipiac and Central Washington battled it out to the last second. While Central Washington added 2 tries to begin the second half, it was the end of the half where Quinnipiac's defense buckled down. The Bobcats held the Wildcats at bay at the 5-meter line, not allowing them into the try zone. And when the clock finally struck 0, Quinnipiac was able to clear the ball, winning the game 29-24.
There is absolutely nothing but fight and grit inside of there. When you're there packing it in and the pressure's on and you know that you've got to defend your own territory, there's nothing better than watching your pack deliver, and our forwards absolutely delivered.
We stayed true to our defense and we stayed true to, pulling people over and making our hits. So not getting frazzled and knowing that we could stop them and thinking, instead of thinking, oh, they're just going to make it.
After losing to the Wildcats earlier in the month, the Bobcats made adjustments. One change was moving Emily Roskop from fullback to playing on the wing, where she shined.
Just a lot of space wide and a lot of great support from my teammates and good running lines and just getting the ball wide quick. I'm good with anything. I love playing on the wing. I love having space. Obviously fullback's great too, and I played outside last year. Just throw me anywhere in the back line and I'll be happy.
When she has her moments, she delivers on those moments, and those long-winded runs when you think it's going to stop, it just doesn't stop. It just keeps going. It's pretty incredible.
Quinnipiac will face American International College next Saturday to end its regular season. Carlson likes what she sees as the Bobcats near the playoffs.
Champions play their game under that pressure, so they're getting there and they're processing that, so it's good stuff.
Reporting from Hamden, Kyle Lavasser, Q30 Sports.
The women's soccer team finished up MAC play against Manhattan and Canisius. The Manhattan game was played at home for Quinnipiac, then the Bobcats traveled up to Buffalo, New York for the second game against the Golden Griffs. Let's take a look at the game against Manhattan. So the Jaspers entered the game at 6-2 while the Bobcats entered 4-2-2. We'll toss it to the first half when Nadia Gill goes to kick it in, but it's saved by Olivia Printy. There's no score. Later in the first half, Emma Sol just misses high, still no score. Later on in the first half, we go and see that Manhattan crosses the ball and, headed off Joyce Gargan's head. Emma Sol gets the ball, just hits the crossbar, still no score. In the 38th minute, Carly Glaser passes to Allie Grunstein, and she rips it in for her 4th goal of the season. Quinnipiac leads 1-0. We'll now take it into the second half, 7 minutes in, where Erica Modena passes to Emma Sol for the goal, which ties it up 2-2 at the end of regulation. Now we will head into overtime. As we can see here, Nadia Gill is running up with the field, just wide of the goal, tosses into Al Pelletier, and she's not there in time. Neither team can score in overtime. Game goes to double overtime. As we see, Nadia Gill has the goal and shoots, but just misses high. Quinnipiac ties Manhattan 1-1. The Bobcats go on to be 4-2-3. Dave Clark had some interesting words about his star forward, Nadia Gill, after the game.
No, it starts up top. Nadia not giving the ball to Al. Doing sometimes what she does is she tries to force it and tries to beat everybody and doesn't bring her teammates into the play. And then what ends up happening is players are stepping up to support. If she loses the ball, then you're caught in transition. So no, she gets all the plaudits when she scores goals. She's got to take responsibility in this situation.
They did a really good job of controlling the ball through the middle. They were patient with it. They went around the box, and you know what, we just didn't mark the players we should have, and they were able to dribble in and take a shot. This game would have basically secured second if we won it, so we, if anything, can't do anything but win at Canisius, so that definitely puts some more pressure on the game.
The Quinnipiac Bobcats traveled out to Buffalo, New York to take on the Canisius Golden Griffs. The Bobcats were looking to secure a first-round bye in the MAC tournament down in Disney. Kylie Lance scored the only goal in the 64th minute. Her goal proved to be the difference for the Bobcats as they went on to win this one 1-0. There's the goal right there. Canisius went on to have a few chances with corner kicks and free kicks. Couldn't really get anything going. And really, Quinnipiac really dominated this one, winning this one 1-0. QU did secure their the 3rd seed in the MAC and get that first round bye. They'll play the winner of Rider, St. Peter's. Canisius get the 9th seed, and they will play Niagara. And the winner of that game will take on the top-seeded Monmouth Hawks. Right there, you can see the playoff bracket. Quinnipiac gets the winner of Rider St. Peter's. Like we said, they beat St. Peter's 11-0 earlier this season.
With this win, Quinnipiac secured the 3rd seed for the MAC playoffs this weekend. The men's soccer team had an exciting weekend against the Marist Red Foxes. Shane, let's take a look. As we go in, it was senior day for the men's soccer team. 5 players were honored before the game. As we go into the first half, just over 90 seconds into the game, Max Rothenbucher finds ahead of Yeppe Are for the goal. Quinnipiac leads 1-0. Big celebration there by the soccer team. As we go later on in the first half, Marist comes back later, and after Alan Gavilanes shoots and ties up the game at 1-1. Now we'll go into the second half after Alan Gavilanes already scored to tie it. Freshman Simon Hillinger had himself a day. Here's the first goal of his career to tie up the game in forced overtime. As we'll take a look into overtime, big celebration there by the boys. Matthew Taylor will find Simon Hillinger, the freshman, and he will take it and swoop right there, nets the winning goal. The freshman steals the show on senior day. Quinnipiac goes on to win 3-2.
I can't really remember the moments. It's just the moments after the goal. So in the first goal, I got the ball and then I tried to hit it and I hit it perfectly. So yesterday I practiced it to score that goal and I scored it. I'm really happy to score. And then the overtime winner, I don't know what went in my head, but I just stopped the ball and pinged it in and I was so happy.
Well, it's time for our first commercial break, but when we come back, the men's ice hockey team had a successful weekend.
The women's volleyball team held its annual Dig Pink match in Hamden. Stick around, Sports Paws will be right back.
Bobcat Breakdown presented by the Quinnipiac Bobcats Sports Network.
We are your source for debate.
Did they make the playoffs last year, Tom Jenkins?
When it clicks, it clicks.
We dissect Quinnipiac athletics on a scale you've never seen before.
With Tobia, it almost looks like she's reaching a little bit.
Plus, we bring in the biggest names surrounding college sports.
We are live here at the Times Union Center with Jay Billis.
And of course, some comedy.
But you can only have so much arena food.
I think you're crazy.
Bobcat Breakdown.
Tuesdays at 9:30.
Coming up on #that, we talk about some fun events around Quinnipiac's campus.
And we talk about some weird news that's been discussed around Twitter.
All that and more, we are your source for Quinnipiac's entertainment news.
Hello, and tonight on Sandwich News, we will determine what makes a good sandwich and a bad sandwich. First, the standard sandwich. Uninspired, and frankly, a little gross. But we have here a Ray and Mike sandwich, the Cadillac of sandwiches. And if you want one, well,
come on down to Ray and Mike's at 3030 Whitney Ave, Hamden, Connecticut. Open every day from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. QCash is accepted.
now that's a sandwich.
Whether you're on the quad, in your room,
or heading to class,
tune in to Q30 News.
For stories by student journalists you can trust.
We are covering the latest here on campus and in surrounding areas.
Get the news you need to know every Wednesday night.
Sports Paws is brought to you by Custom Cakes by Steve. If you can dream it, we can bake it. Welcome back to Sports Paws.
The Quinnipiac men's ice hockey team traveled up to Boston this past weekend to take on the Northeastern Huskies in a two-game series. Q30 Sports men's ice hockey beat reporter MJ Baird has more.
The goal judges were busy on Friday night at Matthews Arena. After the red light stopped flashing, it was Quinnipiac 6, Northeastern 4.
You know, we didn't play well for 2 periods, but we were resilient and
it's a nice win to get to do that on the road against a really, really good Northeastern team.
The Bobcats may have won, but the scoreline wasn't indicative of the game. Northeastern dominated in shots, outshooting Quinnipiac 41-15, yet the Bobcats had more of what mattered most, tallies in the goal column.
You know, it's been a while. Usually we're the ones that we typically outshoot other teams, but it's early in the season. We're still trying to get some forwards up to speed and some players up to speed.
The shots on goal, to think that validates, them thinking that they played well. It just wasn't good enough. We've got to find a way to get more goals than them at the end of the game. So, we got 4. 4 should win your hockey game.
Quinnipiac scored first and last on Friday, but it was Tanner McMaster who netted the game-winning goal for the Bobcats.
Jermaine made a really nice outlet pass, and I kind of noticed I didn't have much support, so I kind of went to the outside and I tried putting the shot through a screen, and luckily it went in. So I kind of just wanted to get it through his legs there. I've been working on that, shooting through a screen, and luckily I got by the goalie low blocker.
These two teams will rematch right here tomorrow at Matthews Arena. For the Huskies, short-term memory is the key, but for the Bobcats, they'll look to produce a similar effort, perhaps with just a few more shots. Reporting in Boston, MJ Baird, Q30 Sports.
The Quinnipiac men's ice hockey team took on Northeastern in a 2-game series up in Boston. Dylan Sakura opened up the scoring for the Huskies. Chase Prisky capitalized in the second and third periods to help send the game to overtime. 4 minutes into overtime, Alex Whalen scored the game winner for the Bobcats. Landon Smith recorded 2 assists in the game, giving him 100 career points in a Bobcat uniform. Now we'll take a look at the USCHO polls. And we can see that in number 11 we have Providence with a record of 3-2. We have Minnesota State with a record of 3-2 as well. Then we have Quinnipiac at 13, which they moved up from the 18th spot last week. New Hampshire at 14 with a record of 5-1, and Penn State at 15 with a record of 3-3.
Michigan Tech fell 1 spot to 16 after going to 15. The Quinnipiac women's ice hockey had this past weekend off. As a result, the Bobcats still remain outside of the USCHO.com polls. Wisconsin stays at number 1 in this week's polls. As the Badgers remain perfect at 10-0 this season, ECAC rival Clarkson is in second place. Boston College, Ohio State, and Colgate round out the top 5. Bobcats open up conference play against Dartmouth and Harvard this weekend.
And now we have MJ Baird live in the studio with us. MJ, you were at Media Day to talk to Rand Pecknold. What did the Bobcats head coach have to say?
Yeah, Emma Shane, thank you. The first question I asked him today was what he liked and didn't like from his 2 goaltenders this past weekend. They each started 1 game. So let's have a listen.
With Keith, 2 things would be recovery and his just having more urgency, being prepared for bad things to happen. And with Shorty, it's early, but maybe taking those medium range shots, figuring out getting on his angles a little bit better. He's been really good in practice, and then he's given up a couple in games that I think he'll seal that up a little bit better as we go.
So as you just heard from Pecknold there, Keith Petrozelli, his freshman goaltender, things can be a little panicky at times, but if you look at this weekend, it wasn't really that bad at all. He let up 4 goals, but he did face 41 shots on Friday night against Northeastern, so definitely a solid effort from him. You might say 4 goals against, but that didn't really tell the whole story as Northeastern outshot the Bobcats 41-15 across the entire game. Then if you look at Andrew Shortridge, Rand Pecknold said he makes some big-time saves, and you just heard there the 2 things he thinks he should work on, or the 1 thing is that mid-range shots, and something Andrew Shortridge has had, a slight issue with in the past might be getting his angle correctly, cutting down that angle for a forward that comes down into the high slot and shoots, or maybe even if it's a rebound. We saw a couple times this weekend against Northeastern in that second game. He gave up a rebound, but to his credit, he was able to get back into position and make those saves the second time around. So I would think Quinnipiac and Rand Pecknold are going to go with a split between Shortridge and Petrozelli moving forward, at least for the foreseeable future, but we'll have to see. So I also asked Rand Pecknold, I said, 3-1-1 out of conference, how do you think this was and what can you take away from it? And here's what he said.
There's a lot of good things. I thought our compete level was good. Obviously, only having 1 loss in those 5 was pretty impressive, but I thought our compete level was good, resilient, and I also probably learned that we got a lot of things to get better at. We got to work on some things.
Well, work on some things. That's pretty vague, huh? Well, If I had to pick a few things, here's what they'd be. One, it'd be roll 4 lines. Rand Pecknold said this today. In the past, they've had 4 lines that he could really throw over the bench at any time, and they could go out there and compete on the same level, really. He used to say, we don't have a 1 through 4 line. We have 4 solid lines. Any one of them could be a number 1 line. But as far as this year goes, moving forward, he needs to get the freshmen up to speed, and that doesn't just go for one person. That goes for players like Devin Moore, Matt Forchuk, Dan Nabondas, who hasn't even suited up yet for the Bobcats. But I will say too, the sophomore Nick Germain, Rand Pecknold said today, he thought made a big jump this weekend. Also, Alex Whalen, of course, coming out absolutely on fire for the Bobcats, 4 goals in his first 5 games. And another thing, going back to work on some things that Rand Pecknold said, I'd say they need to finish. I mean, they took 4 of their 5 games, a 1-goal lead into the 3rd period. They ended up losing that lead and would go to overtime. Yes, some they won, some they lost, and they tied against BC. But I think those are the 2 big things Quinnipiac's going to need to work on moving forward. They do have this weekend off, and then in 2 weekends they will start their conference play. So, Emma, Shane, that's all I have for Men's Ice Hockey Media Day. Back to you.
Thank you, as always, MJ. Quinnipiac needed a win against Temple if they wanted to keep their chances of qualifying for the Big East tournament alive. Let's see how they did. Quinnipiac went down to Temple last season in search of a win, and they couldn't get the job done. They ended up losing 3-2. Here's Quinnipiac warming up. They need this win if they want to have any chance of qualifying for the Big East tournament. Only the top 4 teams qualify. They currently sit on the outside looking in. First half here, Quinnipiac with the early opportunity, but their shot is blocked. Quinnipiac now, Michelle Federico with the pass to Marissa Larkin. Terrible goalkeeping by Temple right there. 1-0 Quinnipiac. Temple on offense now. Barrels into a Quinnipiac defender. That's a foul. Now we'll head to the second half. Livy Golini here gets caught out right here, but Maddie Lilac and Quinnipiac, Lisa Ruiz Martinez on the penalty corner. Her initial shot's blocked. Her follow-up also goes wide. Quinnipiac still hanging on to a 1-0 lead. Now her sister Inez Ruiz Martinez will intercept that pass for Quinnipiac, and that will do it for them. Quinnipiac with the 1-0 victory over Temple. They took on Lafayette tonight at 6.
The Quinnipiac Bobcats took on the Lafayette Leopards earlier this evening in a non-conference matchup. Lafayette scored a few minutes before halftime, but it was all Quinnipiac later in the game. Dana Barlow propelled the Bobcats to a 2-1 lead early in the second half. Lafayette scored with just under 2 minutes remaining, forcing the game into overtime. Barlow had numerous chances in overtime before she finally capitalized and gave the Bobcats a 3-2 overtime win. Quinnipiac will host UConn this Friday, which is a must-win game for the Bobcats.
Despite beating Temple 1-0, the Quinnipiac Bobcats are in 5th place on the outside looking in. UConn in 1st place. That's who Quinnipiac hosts this Friday, in need of a win, but not looking very certain, with UConn being 15-0, 6-0 in conference. Providence in 2nd, Old Dominion in 3rd, Liberty in 4th. Quinnipiac holds a tiebreaker over Liberty after that upset victory earlier this season. Quinnipiac really needs to shock the world and beat UConn on Friday if they want to qualify for the Big East tournament.
Quinnipiac volleyball had 2 home games this past weekend against the Iona Gales and Manhattan Jaspers. The volleyball team took on Iona in a MAC conference match on Saturday. Let's check it out.
Yeah, you see right there, Quinnipiac really struggling. That was their 4th straight loss in conference play. Really missing out on Elizabeth Cluse and Jen Coffey right there. Natalie Lecco really leading the way with 12 kills, but they just couldn't get it done, losing in 4 sets again. And they struggled against Manhattan as well on Sunday.
Let's take a look at the latest Twitter poll about women's volleyball and if the team will make it to the MAC volleyball postseason. The team has 6 wins and 7 losses with 5 games left. 42% said that yes, the Quinnipiac volleyball team will make it, while 58% said no.
Quinnipiac fans really not confident about their women's volleyball team. It's already time for another break.
When we come back, we will talk about 3 more teams and discuss your favorite time of the night, top 5 plays.
Hello, and tonight on Sandwich News, we will determine what makes a good sandwich and a bad sandwich. First, the standard sandwich. uninspired, and frankly, a little gross. But we have here a Ray and Mike sandwich, the Cadillac of sandwiches. And if you want one, well,
come on down to Ray and Mike's at 3030 Whitney Ave, Hamden, Connecticut. Open every day from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Qcash is accepted.
now that's a sandwich.
Bobcat Breakdown presented by the Quinnipiac Bobcats Sports Network.
We are your source for debate.
Did they make the playoffs last year, Tom Jenkins?
When it clicks, it clicks.
We dissect Quinnipiac athletics on a scale you've never seen before.
With Tobia, it almost looks like she's reaching a little bit.
Plus, we bring in the biggest names surrounding college sports.
We are live here at the Times Union Center with Jay Billis.
And of course, some comedy.
But you can only have so much arena food.
I think you're crazy.
Bobcat Breakdown.
Tuesdays at 9:30.
Whether you're on the quad,
in your room,
or heading to class,
tune in to Q30 News.
for stories by student journalists you can trust.
we are covering the latest here on campus and in surrounding areas.
Get the news you need to know every Wednesday night.
Sports Paws is brought to you by Custom Cakes by Steve. If you can dream it, we can bake it. Welcome back to Sports Paws.
Women's golf and men's tennis are nearing the end of their fall seasons, while the men's and women's cross-country team are preparing for their MAC championship meets. The women's golf team is in Hudson, New York, playing at the St. John's Invitational. It is the Bobcats' final tournament of the fall season. This is a two-day tournament. After day one, the team is third out of 6 teams. The Bobcats are led by Alexandra Sazin and freshman Queenie Lai, who are both tied for second place with 76. Luciana Tobia Palza is 1 stroke behind them. Brown University is in first after the first round with a team score of 309, and St. John's is in second with a score of 312. Quinnipiac is at a team score of 313.
The Quinnipiac men's tennis team traveled to New Haven, Connecticut to participate in the ITA regionals this past weekend. After the first day of competition, Julian Rosenstein advanced to the main singles draw after winning his match in 3 sets, 4-6, 6-2, and 7-5. Axel Stern and Kyle Apper advanced to the second round of the main doubles draw after beating Army 8-7. The following day, the duo of Stern and Alper took on the Princeton Tigers and lost 8-7 to the Tigers. The Bobcats will travel back to New Haven in 2 weeks to wrap up their fall seasons when they participate in the Connecticut State Championships.
The men's and women's cross-country teams both competed at the Central Connecticut State University mini-meet this past weekend. The men's team placed 14th out of 18 teams. Tyler Mannion was a top performer for the Bobcats, running 16:28. The women's team placed 11th out of 21 teams. Allison Karen of the Bobcats ran 10:57.9. She placed 42nd out of 142 runners. Both of the teams are now preparing for the 2017 MAC Championship next weekend at Monmouth. Shane, it is now everyone's favorite time of the night. Top 5 plays of the week. You take the odds and I'll take the evens. Shane, let's start with 5.
All right, number 5, we're going back to field hockey. Lucy Reed on a breakaway for Temple. She gets around Livy Golini, but Kira Godowski bails out her goalie with possibly the biggest defensive save of the year for Quinnipiac.
Now with number 4, Simon Hillinger scores a gorgeous goal from well outside the box. What a day for the freshman. Bobcats eventually win the game in double overtime.
Back to number 3 here, back to Quinnipiac. First Maris. Rashawn Daly's shot is tipped. Eamon Whalen beaten to the ball right there by Bo Hornberger. He robs Whalen of a goal. Quinnipiac
now
would win that in double OT.
We'll look at number 2, men's ice hockey versus Northeastern. Odin Tufto avoids a diving Husky player and gets a shot off while he's falling down for one of the goals of the year. The Bobcats went on to sweep Northeastern in the 2-game series.
And number 1, we're going back to Quinnipiac versus Maris. Look at Eamon Whalen creeping down the sideline. Simon Hillinger, the freshman, showing great patience right there to bury the overtime winner for Quinnipiac. They went on to win that one 3-2. I don't know, have a little problem with that top 5. I thought Odin Tufto, maybe should have been number 1.
Agreed.
But, I don't know, maybe, I think Nick Germain has a little competition for Mayor Danglepiac next year. That was a sweet goal right there. Nick Germain's goal against Brown last year was also pretty incredible. Well, that's all the time we have for this episode of Sports Paws. Make sure to follow at Q30 Sports on Twitter for the latest on all Quinnipiac sports.
And make sure to check out our website at q30tv.com for all content involving Quinnipiac athletics. For Shane Dennehy, I'm Emma Carmen. We'll see you next time on Sports Paws.
Paper.